This story took place a few years ago now, just before the COVID pandemic hit. I'm a man who loves camping and decided to take a trip by myself into a forest a few miles away from my house. I wanted to camp there for a couple of nights. The forest had some very nice sights and some good hiking trails which I thought I would walk on the days that I'm staying there. I will hopefully get some nice pictures too, I thought to myself. I packed up my gear and loaded it into my car. I forgot to mention, I'm a bare bones camper and only take the essentials. In my opinion, it makes it more fun and enjoyable, as I love a challenge. Then, once I loaded my car, I set off to the nature trail, in which I would therefore go off course to find my campsite and stay there for the next few nights. I finally arrived there, and it was already sunset. A beautiful orange glow painted my surroundings. I set off walking into the forest along the trail, as I knew I needed to be fast before nightfall came. The trail was empty, with no one else in sight. The only sound I heard was the song of songbirds and other animals taking shelter for the night. After walking for about 20 minutes on the trail, I came off it and started to find my campgrounds, however, making sure I knew my way back to the trail so I wouldn't get lost, as that would be a very unfortunate occurrence. I found a clearing right next to a mini lake, which I thought would be perfect in the morning, as I could go in for a nice swim and maybe even wash myself off there and just have a good time really. It was now night time, and I had to use my flashlight to help me set up my tent and gear. The tent was set up with ease, and I was sorting my stuff out now for inside the tent. I collected some firewood and was about to make a fire when I heard what sounded like footsteps directly in front of me. At first, I didn't think much of it, as I assumed it to be an animal. I mean, after all, I was in a forest. However, the footsteps sounded too light to be an animal, yet too heavy to be anything small. I looked up and saw nothing. I proceeded to carry on doing what I was doing, setting up my tent and all the insides, and then was about to carry on with the fire again when I heard footsteps behind me. This time I was a bit more unnerved and looked behind me and still couldn't see anything. However, I still heard the footsteps moving around. That is when I decided I had to put my mind at rest, and shone my flashlight at the footsteps to prove it's an animal. I turned it on and froze. The man's head was clearly seen peering behind a tree, as if he was purposely hiding. As soon as the light landed on him, he took his head away. I now knew I was in danger, as who else would be out this late just walking around, and especially acting like that? I decided my stuff wasn't worth bringing with me, as I would have no time to pack up in fear of that man. I ran off into the woods to try and find the trail. All while I was doing, I could have sworn I heard footsteps getting closer and closer behind me. However, I never looked back. I made it onto the trail and carried on sprinting. All the while, the footsteps were still following. Multiple. This time, multiple set of footsteps were behind me. I finally, with some sort of luck, made it back to my car and outran whoever was following me, or even whatever was following me. As I was running, I dug out my keys and unlocked the car door straight away as soon as it was in sight. I got inside, looking right behind me, and now put the car in drive and floored it out of there. Looking back at the entrance of the trail, however, I saw nothing. Long story short, I never returned to that campsite, or even that trail for that matter. I never went back for my stuff. I just want to know what I would have saw if I had turned around behind me. This is a short story of mine of an event that occurred a couple of months back. Me and my mates were in class, bored out of our mind, when one of them, who I will call Brad for the sake of the story, suggested we go camping in the woods behind our house. Long story short, we all agreed that this was a fantastic idea and we planned to do it that night. One of my other friends, called Jake, suggested we take a few beers with us so we can loosen up a little bit and enjoy the night. That night, we all met up at Brad's house at 10 PM and got all of our camping gear. I forgot to mention that there was 3 of us, me, Jake and Brad. Brad's house is literally right next to a massive stretch of woods leading from his backyard, therefore all we needed to do was simply set off walking from there. Also, the houses in this area were very spaced apart, so the nearest house was quite far away from Brad, so we were all good for not being called trespassing or anything like that. I would say we walked about 50 minutes before settling down. We could no longer see Brad's house, which at the time was quite unnerving, but also refreshing as we were surrounded by the sound of nature, and also would need to be cautious with how we can be in disturbing other residents of the area. That was also aided by the fact the houses were far apart, which just therefore made this experience more enjoyable and a much more idea. Setting the 3-man tent up in the darkness was a challenge to say the least, however, we eventually did it. The annoying thing was we only had one flashlight between us. However, we only originally thought that we needed one. Jake asked Brad if he had another in his house and said he did, so Jake said he'd walk back and go get it. He took our flashlight with him on his way back, left me and Brad in total darkness. Nothing but trees and pitch black surrounded us. We waited a few minutes before hearing Jake come back. That's quick, we thought. We turned around to greet him, however, he was walking very slowly towards us, and his flashlight was off. We said his name, and he just froze in place, just staring at us. We couldn't see his face. Then behind him, we saw someone approaching. There was a flashlight coming from this person. It was Jake, calling out our names. So, who is this standing in front of us? We screamed and ran past the figure straight towards Jake. We yelled for him to run, and he did so. We ran straight back into Brad's house, leaving all our gear behind. We all spent the night at his house, as we felt unsafe being alone. Even worse with the woods, where that man had been, was mere meters away. We went to collect our gear in the morning, and thankfully nothing was stolen. However, this is just more disturbing, as the intentions of this person are even more unknown and could even possibly be dark. If he wasn't there to rob us or nick our stuff, then what was he planning on doing? All I know is that I don't think we will ever go camping again.